Hey, Tom Bartels from GrowFoodWell.com. And today I wanted to talk about planting your garden with diversity in mind on multiple levels, and how to transform your garden from a box with rows into more of a micro ecosystem. It's really an episode about connectivity in general, closed-loop gardens, and how it's all powered by microorganisms. Now, I get a diversity of questions each week in the program about various gardening challenges, but some of the best solutions come from an understanding of how the gardens work biologically as a system. From that standpoint, the gardens look a lot different. And once we understand all the moving parts of that natural system, we can all grow remarkable amounts of food at home. So let's jump in. Many people experience failure when planting a garden, especially at the start. It's hard at the beginning. In fact, I'll throw a question out here. Which garden bed is harder to attain? This one or this one? Now, I would say the first one is harder to make successful, since most people never begin. And when they do begin, if they plant their first garden without understanding how the basic biologic systems work, they'll get to experience some level of failure, which can be a great mentor, but many times it's so frustrating to try to grow plants without the assistance of natural systems that the gardener gives up and never plants the second season. In simple monocrop scenarios or gardens with sterile, compacted soil, the soil microbe and insect diversity is minimal. This is an invitation to disease and pest insects that can overpopulate and create problems. But when you invite higher levels of diversity in the soil and plant life, the predator-prey relationships create a dynamic equilibrium. So even though it's counterintuitive, if you find yourself with an insect pest problem, usually the answer is to attract more insects. They'll work it out from there. So my job is to get you from this first bed to this kind of success. And although this garden may look like it takes more attention, it actually doesn't from a square foot perspective, since the momentum offered by the natural systems in the background do much of the work for me. But to do that, you need to be aware of the base components of the symphony you are conducting. You start with feeding the soil good compost and using enough diversity in the gardens to generate a dynamic ecosystem of plants where this music can take place. And when you do, the results can be astounding. So today, I'd like you to think about designing your garden as a mini ecosystem. You are the orchestra leader who gets everything in motion. And that starts with the bacterial and fungal organisms in living soil. This is a video in real time of a sample I recently extracted from my compost. There's a jungle of activity, countless organisms in predator-prey relationships. Just about every shape you see on this screen is a living organism. This is the base of the food chain. Bacteria, fungi, microarthropods, nematodes, protozoa, and countless organisms are in a dramatic life and death process, and your plants will use them to access the nutrients they need to grow. It's a living system that has continued unabated for millennia. Organisms living off the minerals in the soil, organic material, and each other. Without their constant interactions, your soil wouldn't be able to generate growth above the surface on its own. When plants are given this kind of living soil, they will jumpstart activity using the power of photosynthesis to turn sunlight into sugar and then release exudates underground into the area around the tips of their roots, called the rhizosphere, where microorganisms will surround the roots like a feeding trough, providing protection to the plant from pathogens, and the nutrient exchange begins. This symbiotic relationship between plants and microorganisms in the soil has been operating for over 400 million years. That system of soil health is still here because it works, and it's based on the natural law of return. You can utilize this symbiosis and direct it to assist you with your success in the garden. You get to conduct the orchestra once you understand the rhythm. When given the right conditions and raw materials, the plants are in control of the process. They put in motion the continuous exchange of nutrients that will attract other biological players in the form of worms, crawling and flying insects, a host of pollinators, beetles, wasps, bees, moths, butterflies, and countless others. With insect diversity comes more birds to prey on those insects, and more complex predators. Increased diversity of plants flowering at different times throughout the season attract the pollinating insects in higher numbers. Leaf canopies of varied shapes and heights that allow for habitat, reproduction, and hunting, and the consumption and transport of pollen all add to this attraction. The language of nature is connectivity. So your job as a gardener is to generate the conditions that allow this symphony of life to evolve and flourish in your backyard oasis. Think about a garden from an insect's point of view. Is there food for them? And diverse plant cover? Seasonal habitat? Places to overwinter? Plenty of prey insects to feed on? Where can they take cover when it rains? From the plant's point of view, are they rooted in living soil? Can they feed off a vibrant soil food web with populations of fungus, bacteria, and microorganisms to harness for nutrient exchange? When you get this level of plant and organism diversity, the biological activity level jumps to a remarkable degree. Not only does that mean healthier food plants for you, but also a healthier and more diverse ecosystem around your home. And your food plants are protected by the very insects and microorganisms that are now surrounding them. When you experience this mini jungle of relationships, it's a clear reminder of how a garden is a living example of how the larger biosphere operates. It will actively demonstrate how everything connects to everything else. In a modern world where we're expected to minimize our footprint, this is one area where you can go the opposite direction and exercise your creativity to improve and expand the diversity in your backyard ecosystem. Your harvests will pay dividends and give you a deeper connection to the biosphere through plants. So keep the thought of diversity in plants, insects, and soil organisms in mind when you're planning what to grow on your property. This kind of diverse garden ecosystem can be done at any scale, with minimal cost, by just following a few key steps to close the loop on your garden ecosystem. Most of the images you've been seeing here are from about a 600 square foot section of my home garden. But the infrastructure that generates that diversity happens not only around the perimeter of the garden with diverse annuals and perennials, but it also includes human behavioral change to align with that system's needs. So your job is to just assist nature in its tendency to generate and manage diverse ecosystems. You feed the soil feeds the plants feed the insects that pollinate the plants and protect it from harm from other invasive insects. Then the plants feed you, and the remaining organic matter feeds the soil again. And the seeds you save will start the whole process over the following year. When you align the design of your growing space with these priorities in mind, you can continually be inspired by the response from plants. Now, this may not look like much behind me, but this is where all that plant activity took place last year and will again this year because all the components are in place. And in contrast to that elegance that you saw in that plant community operating on its own, there is a more clunky human infrastructure in the background that sets all this in motion each year. So I wanted to take a brief walkthrough on a diagram that shows some of those moving parts. Let's take a look. Okay, so disregard the confusing flow at the moment. What I'm going to do is just talk about this in terms of representation. What is this representing as far as what's going on around my particular garden? And this diagram can be applied to any home scale garden that's trying to approach a closed loop system. So on the top left here, you'll notice I've got a black box. That means it's not a natural system. It's coming in from a commercial input. So I have groceries that come in to the home. All the biologic material in those grocery bags that you bring into the house to eat, there's extra vegetable matter, and that comes out this other arrow where vegetable matter comes out, goes down into the worm bin, goes down into a compost pile, and then goes back into the soil. The soil food web helps plants grow, which leads to more food that you eat. See how that cycle closes in. So basically, when you bring groceries in, none of that organic matter leaves the property. It all gets recycled back into the soil to grow more plants. And whether you have a worm bin or a compost pile or both, that's not the point. It's just that you have to have some mechanism to bring that matter back into completed compost that goes back into the soil. So all the green boxes on this chart are representing natural systems. So the big green box surrounding it all is the garden closed system. This green box on the left is sunshine coming in. The one on the top right is rain coming in from outside. The one on the bottom is hijacking carbon headed for the waste stream from chips and leaves that I bring in from municipalities. So that represents my composting efforts when I bring in large amounts of leaves onto the property that were headed for the landfill, and I process them instead and add them to the soil. So that's coming from a natural system, and I'm actually pulling that out of the waste stream to bring it into this system. All the gray containers here represent hard infrastructure that has to be built. On the top left, you've got sunshine coming in that leads to solar panels that collect that for electricity. You've got the solar dryer, which is my infrared dryer that I use to dry food that then can later be eaten. The maximum solar plant canopy refers to intensive plant spacing. So I'm covering every square foot of soil that I can to maximize or optimize the amount of sunshine I can collect on any square footage of the property that I'm growing food in. Now, if we move down to the root cellar, that's using the stable earth temperatures, that natural cooling ability and stable temperature ability of the planet to keep the root cellar cold to store vegetables that then later are eaten as well. And on the top right, with the rain coming in, the rain catchment refers to carbon-rich soil. Now, if you have enough carbon in your soil, say upwards of 5 or 10% organic matter in your soil, that is going to catch far more rain, especially during really heavy rain events where erosion can sheet wash water off of the property. If you have a lot of organic matter in your soil with constant amendments every year with compost, you will catch far more and capture far more rain when those events happen. So that's what is referring to that catchment of rain coming in from the top corner. And so this all represents this flow of materials that comes into this system that super generates life in that inner circle, which is where the gardens are. So I hope this helps demonstrate some of the components that help you create a closed loop gardening system. There are no synthetic chemical additives in this system. There are no fertilizers being purchased and brought into this system. There is only a natural cycling of organic chemistry happening. Now, it's never totally closed in this particular diagram because we are purchasing groceries in that black square that come into this system. But we're very aware that we're not letting any of that go out and being taken away as far as garbage or anything. All the biological waste, quote unquote waste, is being processed back into the soil. Sounds easy, right? Well, take it one step at a time. There are a lot of moving parts, but most of them are provided for you by natural systems. So incrementally, over time, see how many of these basic support steps you can get working in your garden. Thanks for listening today. I hope it inspired some ideas that you can use at home. Now, most of you have gardens to attend to, so get out there and plant an ecosystem. I'll see you next time.